Hey, what's up everybody, BDO44 coming at you with another video. Alright, so in the previous video I was telling you guys that I see some things opening up NBA wise. I was talking about PJ Tucker and the opportunities that are maybe available to him as he opts out of his final year and looks to test free agency in hopes of finding multiple years is what I think he's doing. And what I'm saying is I believe there's going to be some new contenders coming about, and I also think there are some teams who are not contenders who may, and I use the word pressured very, very loosely, but may be pressured to take on some salaries that maybe they didn't have in their plans at the beginning of the season. I look at it like this, and anybody who's followed me for this long may remember what I'm referring to. But when I was trying to figure out last summer around this time, when Dennis Schroeder was going through all of the issues that he was having with his free agency situation, they were trying to figure out where he could go from the Lakers to, because the Lakers no longer had his money, and it looked like the entire landscape of the NBA had dried up for him. And in my mind's eye, I deduced, before it became even news, before anybody said anything about it at all, I came up in a random video with the idea that the only place Dennis Schroeder could actually go was the Celtics, based on everything that I was seeing in the landscape. And sure enough, that was where he ended up because there was really no other place to go. So the Celtics were almost, via the circumstances, obligated to pick up this high-level basketball player who, by all accounts, couldn't find a space to play in the league based on his value versus the needs of the teams around and the cap space struggles of literally every team that would even consider having him. He was too good to just kick out the league, right? Obviously, he's an NBA player, Dennis Schroeder. But no one had his money. Like, literally no one. So it became a situation where the Boston Celtics were almost incentivized, just for the sake of the land, just to make sure that this player, who of course they should be happy to have at a discount price, has a spot in the league to play. It was literally that serious. And of course, they were able to work it out. And I could argue, because they worked it out, they had the piece to trade for Daniel Tice, and they were able to get the Derek White trade because of that acquisition of Dennis Schroeder that ultimately was an asset that they loved having because he was such a high-level asset, but it wasn't necessarily someone that they had in their plans until like very last minute. I said all of that to say, I think the San Antonio Spurs are in a similar position as it pertains to free agency this season, because there are a lot of teams around the league that have free agent cap space, but do not have roles for the free agents available. And since the free agents available are not a very talented group of free agents in this free agent pool, I think a team like San Antonio may be inclined to take on more talent than they have planned to take on this season, based on the needs of the free agents and the lack of desires to be in those other areas / those places wanting those players. For example, Detroit has all the cap space in the world. It doesn't really benefit them to take on anything though, because they have a young team and Cade Cunningham's running the show. They got Sadiq Bey, they got Killian Hayes, they got everything they want. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, I got the money to do everything, but I'm not trying to dilute my roster by bringing in some player that's not on my timeline just because I got the money to do it. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in doing that. The Indiana Pacers. The Indiana Pacers have money, but they're in the same position. I think they're probably a little more inclined to take on, say, a Russell Westbrook deal, expiring contract, something like that. But like a PJ Tucker, they don't have a role for PJ. They don't expect to be a playoff team. They'll probably acquire a PJ and trade him at the deadline. You know what I mean? He's one of those candidates for that particular type of team. You look around at Orlando. Orlando has the money to bring in whatever. Problem is, same situation. Bunch of young players, and all of their positions are filled with young players. They got the first pick in the overall to this year's draft. They don't need to take on no salary. It doesn't benefit them to take on salary. You look at the Houston Rockets. They had the ability to take on salary. They just shaved salary off. They ain't trying to take on salary for the same exact reason. They got a bunch of young players and no role for these older guys. Dennis Schroeder, of whom we're talking about, is going to probably be leaving the Rockets for that same reason, because they don't have the money to hold on to him Or rather, they do have the money, but they don't have any desire to need to take on a player who's win now in a different timeline. Dennis Schroeder's best probably in a situation where he's going to be winning. They don't expect to win unless it's their young kids taking them there. So that's 3 of your very few free agent destinations that players who may be disgruntled, who ain't going to have a Lakers or a Celtics to go to, probably won't have nowhere to go if one of those teams don't bend and just take them. That's what I'm here to tell you. So what I expect to see is a brand new contender based on the circumstances created by what it is the lay of the land is. Somebody is going to have to let go of this youngster idea in order to take on the salary of some of these very talented players who ain't going to have nowhere to go. That's what's about to happen. You got a big Dennis Schroeder problem. It's not just Dennis Schroeder having this issue. It's a team. You need a whole team to take on some of what's going on with some of these disgruntled players. For example, I look at Ayton. Where is Ayton going? Like, I know he's not going to be in Phoenix because they ain't got his money. And I know there's a bunch of places that could definitely use Ayton. The problem is all of those teams don't have his money. All the places that would need DeAndre Ayton don't have the ability to either acquire him, or they're going to have the pieces that, no one's, they're not going to have the pieces to acquire him or the cap space to acquire him or something. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're Phoenix and you're trying to move Ayton, do you move him for Gobert? No. Why? Because you don't have Ayton's money. So you definitely don't have Gobert's money. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, they're going to have to watch him walk because there ain't no trade. Like, there's no sign and trade there that I can see in my mind's eye of any team with cap space that's going to be willing to give up something to incentive to help them in their quest for getting some compensation back for a player who's going to just leave them for nothing. So that situation is extremely interesting. I don't know what's going to happen there because they don't have his money, and as far as I can tell, there's no trade partners. So he might end up in San Antonio just by default. He might end up in Indiana just by default. You see what I'm saying? Or what you're about to see is a huge shakeup. What you're going to see is a huge shakeup. And if that's the case, then you're going to see some brand new teams. Maybe some things you're not expecting to see. You know what I mean? So I'm looking at KD right now. I'm looking at Kevin Durant, and I'm saying if that situation goes absolutely south and they don't leave him with nothing but Ben Simmons, if I'm KD, I'm calling Popovich. That's what I'm doing. A lot of people are saying Golden State. There ain't no space for him in Golden State no more. Why? Because it's not wise for Golden State to break up that depth to bring in an older KD. That ain't the same KD they lost. This is a KD we just saw had trouble being defended by the Boston Celtics teams they just beat. You dilute 4 or 5 of those guys to bring KD back, and you don't have the same dynamic you had back in 2017, 18, whatever year that was. It's not the same dynamic. You got a different team, and you're going to have different needs. KD may desire to go back to Golden State based on what it is he just saw, but I don't think Joe Lacob and Golden State have any desire to part with Jordan Poole or any of these pieces that they have going for themselves right now. I don't think he's going to have a choice to go back to Golden State. Now, I could be wrong because that's one of the greatest Golden State Warriors of all time. And they would be wise to take him back if at all possible just because he's KD and so would the rest of us. But I think that would probably be the best destination for him, and I don't think that's the one he's going to end up on. Now, me personally, him staying in Brooklyn with Ben Simmons isn't a bad thing at all. If Ben Simmons comes back 100%, the problem is not a bad thing at all does not equal to a championship, and that's all KD should be playing for right now. So that's what I'm doing. If I'm him, I'm going somewhere like San Antonio with a coach like Greg Popovich, and I'm bringing somebody with me just like Kawhi did with PG to the Clippers. That's what I'm doing if I'm KD. I'm calling up Bradley Beal. I'm calling up Zach LaVine. I'm calling up DeAndre Ayton. I'm calling up one of them guys. And I'm saying, listen, free agency is dry. But we can go to a team like San Antonio, and they have the assets. They have the space. They have the culture that I can slip into. And within 2 years, with my talent and their assets, we can build something good and sustainable with DeJounte Murray. That's how I'm thinking. Now, I don't know if San Antonio's inclined to do something like that. If they're wise, they would be. Why? Because he's K-freaking-D. Let's just be honest, because he's KD, baby. And you ain't got nothing going on over there since Tim Duncan and Ginobili and Tony P. Ain't nothing going on. I like DeJounte, and I'm keeping DeJounte, but I'm bringing something to him. Why? Because he's a win-now player, and I think he's going to make a big jump if he has a healthy season. We've already seen what he can do in limited amounts. He's an all-star at this point. I don't think he's getting no worse. I think you need to bring him somebody like KD, and that boy will get somewhere. I promise you he will. He's better than people think he is, and if you get him the talent, he'll show you that. That's all I got to say. They got a piece. In fact, they got several, but I don't know that the timeline waiting for them to reach their highest potential is going to make it so that you're pleased enough to have waited, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In other words, San Antonio's core, in my mind, ain't good enough to wait for if an opportunity like this opens up. There are other teams that have great cores. Theirs is not one of the ones I look at like that. They have pieces that I want. And that's another thing I want to mention about San Antonio. Listen, there's a shortage of wings in this league. The Los Angeles Lakers need a wing better, more than anyone else, because ain't no free agency wings out there for us. Hell, we could try to get a PJ Tucker, but we don't have the money for that. But what I'm telling you is this. That's who I want to do a deal with if I need to get wings, because they got a bunch of them all over the bench. They got a whole team full of them dudes. And like I said, none of them are good enough in my mind. Keldon Johnson's good, but he ain't good enough to be a number 2, number 3. But they do have wings that you can slip into your starting lineup to mimic an all-star team for you. A guy like Walker, you know what I mean? They got so many of these young wings on that San Antonio Spurs team that I would be trying to incentivize them to part with some of those guys if I'm trying to do a deal with them. So, in other words, San Antonio got stuff people want. They do. They got stuff people want. And I look at Atlanta as a team like that, but because they are Atlanta and their whole focus is Trae Young, anybody that comes to their team had better be ready to play defense, and they better be ready for Trae Young to take all the shots. So that's not a situation that I would be wanting to go to if I'm a KD or somebody like that. I'm not, even though Atlanta's a nice, sexy town to go to, you're going to enjoy your life there. But when it's time to play basketball, even if you're Kevin Durant, you're gonna have to be number 2 to that dude right there, because that's exactly how they run things. It ain't gonna make sense either. So that's not a destination for KD to begin with. But the point is, that's how dry the pool is for free agency. That's how it looks. Teams are gonna have to find room for people. I look at Chicago, and they're talking about re-signing Zach LaVine. And no, I'm sorry, and I like Zach LaVine, but not for Chicago. Y'all have different needs. That's where Ayton needs to be. That money that y'all want to give to Zach, that needs to go to a big. Straight up. And then what you need to do is trade Vucevic. That's what needs to happen there. Because that fit doesn't work. It looks good during the regular season, but once the playoffs come around, I'm telling you, it's too many quality players sitting on the bench for too damn long for that Chicago team. That's what it really comes down to. You got Ayo Asumu sitting entirely too long because you got to play Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball. And no, you do not give Zach LaVine $150, $200 million in that situation. Absolutely not. That's a logjam. You don't do that. And I hear Chicago fans, they want to keep Zach LaVine. He's one of the best scorers they got. I promise you, I get it. But y'all can't have everybody at that one position. It doesn't make sense, especially when you have other needs in other areas. If y'all run another year with that same team, if Vucevic is your center, you're going to have the same results. You got it in the first round, I promise. It's not going to work. And this comes from somebody who loved how that team looked to start last year and believes in Caruso and Lonzo Ball as defensive backcourt that I think can help me win the whole thing, because I'm a believer in both of them. And Caruso was the guy who won it for my team as a starting shooting guard. So I already know what he can do. And I believe in Zoe just off rip. So that's a backcourt I would want. But not if they got to share a logjam with like 3-4 other players. Too many good players sitting for the Bulls at all times. They need to condense that roster, get themselves more balance. Go get Ayton. Let Zach go. That is my opinion about that. And look, just looking at the landscape even further, Utah is going to be a brand new team next year. So somebody's going there. They could also, too, do the San Antonio thing if they blow it up properly. The problem is they got a dead weight piece in Rudy Gobert that doesn't hold a whole lot of value right now. And that is something that has to be said aloud. I heard that Utah wants to get top dollar for Rudy Gobert, and I'm going to speak the truth. I wouldn't give up anything for Rudy Gobert right now. Rudy Gobert is a salary dump. I hate to do it. I hate to do it because he has one of the most important lengths of all time. His arm length is important, man. What he can do defensively cannot be duplicated when he's right. My thing is, he's not right anymore. The game has officially passed him by. When teams can shoot the three, he can't stay on the floor. And I hate it. You're talking to somebody who hates this. This is one of my most hated things about the Steph Curry era. I hate it because he's rendered centers completely useless, even good ones. If they can't guard the perimeter, if they can't get out to that three-point line and block a three-point shot while maintaining their ability to do all their other duties, they're literally fossils right now. And he is at the top of the list because of his contract, for which he earned. He earned that being a defensive player of the year many times over. Just like I said, Russell Westbrook earned his money. James Harden earned his money. It's just the fact that the way that these contracts are incentivized, near the ends of these deals, the team that signs these contracts is expected to take the biggest hit. You're supposed to be honoring those players for signing that contract by making sure that last year is a great year. So that's why these contracts look so horrible. But even more so, Rudy's contract, if I'm not mistaken, is still very much healthy. I think he's still got several years on it. So getting rid of it, in my opinion, you're going to have to find a sucker. You're going to have to find somebody who doesn't believe what it is I just said about Rudy. That's what you got to find. And unfortunately, the metrics and the numbers are probably going to tell them that they should. If they have a legitimate numbers guy in their organization, they're going to tell them, yo, you can't pay Rudy that. Can't. He's not going to be on the floor enough for you to pay him that. And he's not the player he used to be for you to pay him that. That's what it really comes down to. He's a bigger guy and he's slowing down. So, yeah, that's one of the most undesirable contracts in all of basketball, and I don't know that Utah's going to be able to get rid of it. You thought Russell Westbrook's contract was hard to get rid of? Try getting rid of Rudy Gobert's contract. It's even worse. Why is it worse? Because at least Russell's is expiring in a year. Rudy's, you're on the hook for. You're on the hook for that. Whether you can play him or not, whether he can be on the floor or not, whether he fits your system or not, doesn't matter. You're on the hook for that. I'm not touching it. I don't think anybody should, to be completely honest with you. So that's what I think of Rudy Gobert's situation. It's bad as hell because Utah can't get rid of that thing if everybody's thinking clearly. Now, somebody wants it. I heard Chicago. I think it was Chicago said they want it. It was another team I heard mention that may want that contract. I think both of those teams should consider not even thinking about getting that contract. You may need defense, but the last time we saw Rudy Gobert, believe it or not, he was not playing no defense. And that is the problem. Because we know he's not a scorer. Okay? That's his biggest issue. And if I'm him, I'm getting more aggressive in the paint with the intent of dunking everything this year. Because that's how you're going to raise your trade value. You got to get better offensively. Because your defense ain't coming around. You're not going to get faster next year. That's never going to happen again. But what you can do is become more of a monster in the post. Get yourself a couple extra fouls drawn. Raises your trade value. Or raises your play value, rather. Because I think if Rudy Gobert continues to try to go out there and average like 10 points, and we have sequences like we saw in these playoffs where they get him the ball in the paint and nothing happens, again, he can't affect defense like the defensive player of the year anymore. So, yeah, that is all that is to be said there. I just think Utah's in a very tough spot trying to get rid of that thing. They're going to have to find a sucker or find somebody like New York who would desperately like to get rid of a bunch of contracts that they have no business holding on to anymore anyway, just to bring in a guy that they know is an upgrade to what it is they already have, with a player already in place that does those similar things, like Mitchell Robinson. So if I'm the Knicks, I'm probably not inclined to do that for the same reason nobody else is. But if I'm Rudy Gobert, I'm looking for a team that needs a player like me who already has a player like me in position so that there's no adjustment. That's what I think needs to be made. So he needs to go somewhere like that. Yeah, New York Knicks. Makes a lot of sense to me for him. For the Knicks, hell no. You don't want that contract no more than anyone else does. So that is it. That is what I think of that situation. And of course, Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks is something everybody's been thinking about. So for whatever that's worth, I don't think you'll be able to get both of them. But if I'm Utah, that's what I'm forcing you to do. Because of what it is I just got through saying. Yeah, you can't have Donovan Mitchell unless you take Rudy Gobert too. You got to take them both. That's how I'm playing that. If I'm Danny Ainge, ain't nobody getting no Donovan Mitchell unless they take Rudy Gobert's horrible contract off of me. I don't care about what y'all talking about. Y'all better match them numbers. I want all your picks. I want a bunch of players, including Mitchell Robinson, from which I mentioned. I want Emmanuel Quickly. You see how my mind is going? Because if I'm the Utah Jazz, at the end of the day, the most important thing for me to do is find somebody to get rid of that Rudy Gobert contract. It really doesn't actually matter what I get back. In fact, because of all that I've said, if I'm taking on the Rudy Gobert contract, they're going to have to attach something to it. They're going to have to attach something to it. That's the solution for that. And we're going to have to Ben Simmons this situation. I'm going to want you guys to overpay for that contract. If you want to get rid of it, I want a first-round pick and maybe a second-round pick with it, or maybe even maybe 2 first-round picks, depending on what's logical in regards to the value, because I honestly do not know. But what I'm telling you is, you're going to pay for that. If I'm taking Rudy Gobert's contract, you are going to pay for that. So, understand that's what it's going to be. Jazz are looking to part ways with picks if what I have in my head is actually how it's going to play out. Which is horrible for their rebuild. Horrible. But I don't care if I'm negotiating against them, because I know you need to get rid of that thing, and I know that it's not a desirable contract so long as everybody's thinking clearly. So that's an interesting situation. Keep an eye on Utah. I'm pretty certain they will not look the same next year. And as long as they keep the price tag high on Rudy Gobert, he will be there next year. So take that for what it's worth. I'm really keeping an eye on James Harden, man, even though it said that he's going to be looking to sign a 3-year extension. If that situation is straight, then it's straight. You know, if they've come to an agreement that he's taking a pay cut and it's already agreed upon that he's taking a smaller deal, then ignore everything I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is, when you got that much money on the hook, and like I said, these guys have already earned this. So if they're gifting this money back to these organizations, it's by the grace of their heart. It's not because for some strange reason they've come to the conclusion that they haven't earned it. They have. I think what it comes down to is whether or not someone should want to pay it. So, now that we have this understanding, going forward, I want everybody to look at these contracts the same way. When you sign one of these guys to a $200 million contract, the idea, like the literal idea, is to get rid of it before it reaches that last year. You want to get rid of it before it reaches that last year. You want someone else to be on the hook for that major year. You see how we're on the hook for Russell Westbrook right now? The Los Angeles Lakers got to pay that $47 million? Yeah, we didn't sign him to that. Houston signed him to that. But what did Houston make sure they did? When that year came around, they made sure he wasn't on the team. That is how you're supposed to play that. From here on out, every team's supposed to play it the same way. Anytime you get one of them dudes, unless they're a patriarch, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki type, unless they're one of those, you got to get that thing off of your books before it reaches that last year. Period. Don't keep it there. Just don't. Just don't. It's all the headaches in the world trying to keep that damn thing. And the value of having an expensive year on that contract is what it is that I've been saying about the Los Angeles Lakers Westbrook contract. Why would I acquire a contract like that? Because I can trade it as an expiring contract, and as an expiring contract, because it's so expensive, it can open up cap space of that amount for anyone who acquires it. So that's the value of the pick, of the contract at the end. For those who are trying to figure out why the hell do I want a $47 million Westbrook contract, that is why anybody would desire to have that thing, because it is a good trade piece for someone who wants to free up that amount of money. So now that we got all that out the way, I really truly believe that the Los Angeles Lakers are about to make a huge mistake. You guys already know this. I've made a bunch of Laker videos talking about our issues, but I just know that we're going to do something that is going to look really, really good on paper, and it's going to look really, really good on the floor. But the meat and potatoes of our team, we're going to have to find wings. We're going to have to find players who can play the perimeter. So that's the main thing. There's nobody in free agency that can really do that for the LA Lakers. worth talking about. I think the best name I saw was like Josh Jackson, whom I like, but he ain't going to change the world. And I'm not sure he's even leaving Detroit. So at this point, I think the Lakers should be looking to try to acquire wings in trade, or they need to raise the price on players like THT, of whom they probably should keep for this reason. Yes, THT's contract is trash for this year for us, based on where he's at in his development, not necessarily his upside. However, because of the dried up nature of the free agency pool with wings, he should be worth more to us than he would have been in normal circumstances. Simple as that. Can't find what he is. So guess what? That $11 million ain't looking crazy no more. Now it's looking like something you should be willing to pay. So that's how things change, man. That's how quickly things can change in the NBA. You look at the free agency pool and you're like, oh, so I can't replace this guy? Oh, okay, then maybe I need him after all. And so that's where we're at. I think we need to find players who have length, could play multiple positions. That's why I like what we're doing in regards to taking looks at Shaq's son and players like that, Scotty's son, because they fit the mold. You know what I mean? They literally fit the mold. They're wings who can play multiple positions. Guy like Scott Pippen Jr., he got his dad's arm length, man. He's got his dad's defensive mindset. That's the type of thing we need to try to find in places that don't cost that much, you know? So I think our team needs to do that. And of course, there are many other teams around the league that need to do the same damn thing. So use your G League, buy into the second round. Don't be afraid of guys that don't get drafted, because you're going to find some fantastic talent in the undrafted pool this year. I can promise you that. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole rookie of the year was an undrafted player this season. That's how real it's starting to become in terms of finding talent in places that maybe they're not getting the respect that they deserve because of these small towns, stuff like that. I think this is the era to be looking closely with the fine-tooth comb in little places where guys don't get attention, because the game is growing. So the likelihood that you find players that aren't getting attention who are going to be stars is higher than it's ever been, because of where we are in basketball, how much attention certain AAU teams and things like that are actually getting. That creates the environment for guys to slip through the cracks that you ain't never heard of because they're from a small town. That leaves room for guys who are overseas, who you're not really paying as much attention to slip through the cracks. You know what I'm saying? So just believing that the environment exists makes it so that one should be looking in places where you normally don't look. I think that is an important thing to say. The Lakers need to be looking in the little places, Iowa, North Dakota, Africa. You need to be looking in those places now, because I promise you, there's somebody that's not getting no funding that is fire. He's out there. I can feel it. There's an Elijah Wan out there. You need to find it. Lakers, find him. So that's what I got to say, man. That's what I got to say. And when that person emerges, remember, you heard it here first. They are out there. That somebody's going to find them. They're somewhere you ain't never heard of, and they're a Hall of Famer. They're there. So that's what I got to say, man. That is what I got to say. I just wanted to come up here, give you a rapid fire NBA thought, whatever comes to mind. I hope everybody's having a great holiday season. And yeah, I think I'll call it a day for now. Get back to you guys if anything actually happens. BDL44, thank y'all for watching. I'm out.